our next speaker. Thank you.
I think it's fine. Mr. Ross Hetrick was a business reporter for 20 years for the Newport News Daily Press and the Baltimore Sun papers. He owned a coffee shop in Gettysburg for 8 years, which was called Ross's Coffee House and Eatery. And he works currently as a lab technician at Nouse Foods. We know him best for his association with the Thaddeus Stevens Society, which he founded in 1999 to promote and preserve the legacy of Thaddeus Stevens. Mr. Ross Hetrick is the president of Thaddeus Stevens Society, and he's going to speak to us today about Thaddeus Stevens as portrayed in film.
Well, first of all, I just want to say that this has been a great seminar so far. Now you're going to have to listen to me, so we'll have to see how that turns out. But this whole today, and actually there will also be events over in Gettysburg on Monday, is sort of like, for me, my birthday, Christmas, Easter, 4th of July, all sort of rolled up in one, and it's just been incredibly great. I just really love it, and I want to particularly thank Bill Grissom, president of the college, for helping me out, Beverly Palmer, of course, Brad Hoke for his excellent presentation, Diane Ambruso for all of her help, Tom Ryan, who the Historical Society that helped, and the people I really, really, really want to thank are all of you out there for coming to this. This is just great that the legacy of Thaddeus Stevens can be exposed to you, and that you have such an interest in it. And so I'd like to give yourself an applause that you can. So in any case, this is just really one of my favorite subjects because it combines two of my great obsessions in life, which is Thaddeus Stevens, of course, and film. In fact, I was a film buff before I was a Thaddeus Stevens buff. And I remember Birth of a Nation. Okay, I'm going to tell you a little experience of my own experience with Birth of a Nation, which is the earliest film that had Thaddeus Stevens in it, or a portrayal of Thaddeus Stevens. I had read about film history in actually World Book Encyclopedia, which I found out later does not really give you all the information. I read about World Book Encyclopedia about Birth of the Nation as being the first epic film ever made. And I thought, this is a film I have to see. And so I remember in 1970, in high school, I was over in a local college town, which is Charlottesville, Virginia, site of the University of Virginia. And I'm tooling around in my father's 49 Chevy, and I see up on the marquee, Birth of the Nation, for one of the theaters there. I said, oh, I gotta get this. So I went back to Waynesboro, and I called up my girlfriend and said, you want to go see Birth of a Nation? You know, this is like the epic film first made, you know. And she said, okay, fine, we'll go over. And so, you know, we go to the movie, and the original, they had this prologue on it, where it talked about how this was a revolutionary film, such techniques as close-ups, intercutting, so on and so forth, were first pioneered in this film, and that it still remains a yardstick to this day. Those were the words on the prologue. So we sit through this film, and we get further in the film, and we just start dropping our jaws at the blatant racism that you'll see, that I'll show here. And as we went out of the theater, my girlfriend turned to me and says, we need a new yardstick. So, anyway, what I'm going to be talking about today is two movies and actually a mini-series that have portrayed Thaddeus Stevens. And as I was saying, I'll take them each one by one, and I'm going to, through the magic of the computer, I'll start the movie, and at certain points I might stop it to make some commentary. The first one will be Birth of a Nation, which I've already said was a groundbreaking film. And still, there are parts of Birth of a Nation which inspire me or really just thrill me when I see them, even though they're so terrible. But Birth of a Nation was made in 1915 by D.W. Griffith. Now, the problem with Birth of a Nation was that the villain was Austin Stoneman, a powerful northern congressman based on Thaddeus Stevens, and the heroes were the Ku Klux Klan. Okay? As I said, this was an incredibly groundbreaking film, and D.W. Griffith was able to become very famous and also very wealthy as a result of this film. It was based on a book written by Thomas Dixon called The Klansman. Now, the legend is, well, not the legend, Thomas Dixon, who was a classmate at Johns Hopkins University with Woodrow Wilson, arranged to have a viewing of this in the White House. And so this was also the first film ever shown in the White House. And supposedly, I'd always been taught that Woodrow Wilson's reaction to the film was, it's like writing history with lightning. And my only regret is that it is all so terribly true. Well, it turns out that he may have not said that. People who were at the screening in the Wilson administration deny that he ever said that. And there's a lot of speculation that Thomas Dixon had basically made it up so that he could go around saying that the film was federally endorsed. But even in those, what you could call racist days, there were still a lot of people who thought this film went over the edge. The film was banned in Chicago, Denver, Kansas City, Minneapolis, Pittsburgh, St. Louis, and of course, Lancaster. It was banned here too, because there were people still who knew Thaddeus Stevens at that point, or who had known Thaddeus Stevens back in the 1860s. It also sparked race riots in various cities, such as Boston, Philadelphia, and other large cities. So it really met with a tremendous outrage, yet it was one of the most successful films up to the time of another Southern apologist film, Gone with the Wind. So, but anyway, supposedly the history of that is D.W. Griffith was sincerely hurt by all of the criticism. And so he made his next film called Intolerance, which was this huge movie with 4 different stories. 3 of them, one about the crucifixion of Christ, the massacre of Protestants in France, the fall of Babylon, and some Bible story that he happened to have sticking around that he stuck into the film. And you have all these movies intercut into this this huge film called Intolerance, and he lost his shirt on that one. So anyway, after that, he really sort of became a footnote to film history. So anyway, now we'll go to Birth of a Nation, and I'll begin it, and you'll see.
Hey, Ross, would you mind just kind of pointing out that Lydia Hamilton Smith is depicted as Lydia Brown, the evil temptress, who is the reason that Stevens is supposed to be so vindictive against the South, because her. Well,
I don't know if that's actually brought out in the film that she's causing that, as she's just sort of.
I think the titles do portray that.
Well, we'll see.
Yeah.
Maybe I didn't include those titles. Let's see.
Yeah. Yeah.
I had this title on a long time. Let's see if this fades away. Is the button? It's moving. Moving? Oh, it's fading.
Oh, here we go.
There's the wig. He had no children over here. Oh, this is wonderful. I love this. Kindly master. Notice the kitten on his arms and the puppies at his feet. And I mean, if you get tired of playing with the animals, you can go on down and jam at the slave quarters. By the way, there were no black people in this film. They were all in makeup. Then again, Stoneman had to screw all that up. Or Thaddeus Stevens. Thaddeus Stevens was against capital punishment, so he never advocated hanging anybody.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah, this is actually one part where I think they get it right. Thaddeus Stevens did become the central power in the country at that point. I call him the 17th and a half president of the United States because he led a veto-proof Congress against Andrew Johnson. And I would say he was one of only 3 people in our history that basically exercised executive power who wasn't president, one of them being Woodrow Wilson's wife after he had a stroke, and the other one was Dick Cheney. I'm glad I got a little laughter.
And Ross, that was Lydia Hamilton. But look at how it's crafted. Lydia Brown standing next to him.
Right to him, yeah.
Wringing her hands. You're now.
Okay.
Well, that was her.
That was her.
That was her, yeah. There's Lydia. Pretty nasty with Actually, this is my favorite part where they have the Klan riding to the rescue, which is like one of the most powerful scenes. They use tracking shots and intercutting. It's really fabulous. It's just too bad it's the damn Ku Klux Klan.
I never saw the horses.
They dress the horses too. All right, well, the next time that Thaddeus Stevens appeared in the movies was 1942. And this time around, he actually was named Thaddeus Stevens. It was in the movie Tennessee Johnson, which was about the life of Andrew Johnson, the president after Abraham Lincoln was assassinated. And in the movie, Van Heflin plays Andrew Johnson, and Thaddeus Stevens is played by Lionel Barrymore, which probably most of you remember as Mr. Potter from It's a Wonderful Life. He was the evil banker in that. So you know, everybody's like, oh, evil there, evil in this movie. But in any case, this movie, it got out that they were portraying Thaddeus Stevens rather badly, and the NAACP protested, along with, interestingly enough, I found out Vincent Price, Zero Mostel, and Ben Hecht, who was a famous screenwriter in Hollywood, protested the movie to the Office of Wartime Information. This was made in 1942. And the Office of Wartime Information got the director to take back the movie and make about $100,000 worth of changes to try to make Thaddeus Stevens look a little bit more human. And if you, I don't have the particular parts in here that they changed. I don't know exactly which parts they changed, but they have some where he's playing with Andrew Johnson's kids, so he looks a little bit more avuncular. So in any case, this movie is really hard to find because it has not been brought out on DVD or on VCR or videotape, and for years I searched and contacted Turner Broadcasting Company to try to get a copy with no luck. And then one day I found that my ex-wife's boss, this is when she was still my wife, had recorded by chance Tennessee Johnson when it was played one time in 2004. So I was able to get that tape and make copies of that. So you have that. We get to see copies of that now because of that very chance occasion that I was able to come across it.
Ross, who was the director? Who produced this?
I don't know. Let me see. Oh, I got something. Oh, yeah, that reminds me of putting out something else. Okay, the director. William Del Tira, D-I-E-T-E-R-I-E. William Tira. I have never heard of him. But that reminds me, this is an article from Time magazine, and it's breathtaking, their sort of casual racism in this. It said, then came Lincoln's assassination and President Johnson's battle with a hostile Congress led by the redoubtable and unscrupulous Thaddeus Stevens, Lionel Barrymore. Johnson seeks to conciliate the South and repair the Union. Stevens to punish the rebels. The part of the film treads on blood-soaked ground, has already aroused protest from the few Negrophiles who revere abolitionist Stevens as a hero. At the suggestion of the OWI, which is the Office of War Information, director William Hetrick reshot some sequences to make abolitionist Stevens a more sympathetic character. So this was from Time magazine. I mean, this was not some obscure journal of racism or something like that. So now we'll see how Thad is portrayed in this movie. I had extra long signs because I'm a slow reader. So. But we're also going to, at the exhibit we're having on Monday over at Gettysburg, we're going to be showing. Yes, there's a question there?
A question about the first film.
Okay, let me just stop this just for a second. Okay.
I was just curious that since the actor was so obviously portraying Thaddeus Stevens, where did Stoneman come from?
Why did they call him Stoneman?
Yeah.
Well, okay, I think there's a couple different reasons. One, it was quote, a book of fiction by Thomas Dixon. And he makes Stoneman having children, which Thaddeus Stevens did not. And in fact, Stoneman in the film moves down to South Carolina, which Thaddeus Stevens did not. So I guess he felt that if he was going to be so loose with the actual life of Thaddeus Stevens, he couldn't actually call him Thaddeus Stevens. Though he did call Charles Sumner, Charles Sumner. And he didn't have to make up a name.
But Ross, Stoneman would also, how do we often refer to New England? You know, and it's stone ground and stone faces and all of those things with here Stephen, born in Danbury, goes to Dartmouth, you know, so I think it may be a New England granite reference.
Might be, but you know, in the movie, Stoneman, aka Thaddeus Stevens, had not only a daughter but also a son that had friends down in the South. So, and then Lillian Gish ends up marrying the head of the Ku Klux Klan.
I was wondering, I thought I saw her face there, like, what's she doing there? I didn't get that, okay.
Yeah.
But think of it as a costume drama. You know, it's medieval knights.
Yeah.
You know, the cross that the Scots used to gather the clans. I mean, that's how they thought they were portraying it.
All right, now we'll see.
With the power and force that you blast your opponent with, Stevens, probably makes much better president. Why, President, I've never found you lacking.
Can you hear this okay?
Put a loud one.
Okay, well, I need a little, does somebody know how to turn up the sound? Thank you, Tim.
So that's Lionel Barrymore on the right.
Right.
Yes.
And I was asked the other day, why does he have a Southern accent? And I could just chalk it up to Hollywood miscasting people.
Okay.
Okay.
Gotta sell the movie.
But unfortunately, you are as stubborn as the orneriest mule in your own tendency. You just fancies each wide apart like that, and you couldn't fudge him with a cannon. You are. That why you fellas in Congress lit a fire under me? But you don't act like our fire so much more to keep your belly nice and warm. Unfortunately, Mr. President, the contraption you're issued, the United States of America, got to keep it on the move. Even if you just state your case and let me state mine, I think we'll see better where we stand. Very good, Mr. President. I propose that we treat the South as an outside conquered people. That we confiscate all estate worth $10,000 containing 200 acres. Then, sir, I would give every adult colored man 40 acres of land. Sell the rest and pay for the war. Now, you must be doing that program, Johnson. We have the votes to override your veto. So it comes to this. You fought a war to preserve the use.
Actually, Stevens couldn't get that through Congress, so there was not even an issue of veto about the 40 acres of the mule.
Preserved it now, you deny that it exists. Gentlemen, my one aim is to carry up Lincoln's policies.
Try and get into your head that Lincoln's Reconstruction program died with it.
Oh, shut up, Waters. Let the president state his own case. Lincoln always held the Confederate States could not secede, that they were therefore never out of the Union. Now they stopped fighting, took the the oath of allegiance to the United States. They ratified the amendment abolishing slavery that you yourself Stephen proud to do Congress. It follows Lincoln's policy. They therefore were entitled to the same rights as the rest of them. Now, gentlemen, it's just as simple as that. First Lincoln tried to block me. How is you? Well, that's a poor substitute, but now make it. Stevens, why did you want to see me alone? To tell you that since you've turned me down, I feel I'll have to turn you out. Engagement? You know the House would prefer charges of high crimes and misdemeanors against you anytime I say. I hope that never happens. Unfortunately, it takes 2/3 vote of the Senate to sustain a conviction. That's the Constitution. You're a great stickler for the Constitution, aren't you? Well, you might as well know that we can get you out by strictly constitutional means. What's this about some amnesty idea of yours, Johnson? So your spy and my cabinet told you that, too. Well, after you broke up my meetings, I got to wondering whether I had any power left at all. I hadn't better resign and go back home. I'll cut the cackle. And then I remembered a power vested in the President of the Constitution, even Congress can't touch it. Maybe you can guess what it is. Power Congress can't touch? Yes. Lincoln would have got around to that before now. I had to wait till things settled down a bit. He wouldn't dare. So I just guessed it. The pardoning power. I'm going to sign something now, and I'm glad you came over here to watch me do it. Here at this desk where Lincoln freed the slaves, I now free their former masters. This proclamation pardons all and restores full citizenship to all who fought for the lost cause in the war between the states.
I just want to comment on this thing. This is just so audacious that he equates freeing the slaves with freeing the masters. Yeah. And then it's interesting, it's very telling, he says that fought for the lost cause in the war between the states. One person put it, I don't know who said it originally, that the South lost the war but won the peace. And the lost cause was essentially a propaganda effort of the South to basically rewrite history, that the South was this heroic state that was battling for whatever, never slavery. And also it's interesting that he calls it the war between the states, because the Southerners also don't like the word Civil War. In fact, in Congress in the 1930s, they officially changed the name of the Civil War to the war between the states. Nobody, recognizes that, and everybody ignores it. But that is the official name of the conflict. And one last thing is, this says that he pardoned all these people at the end of his administration. Actually, he pardoned them right at the beginning of the administration, between the time that Lincoln was assassinated and the time that Congress came back into session in December 4th, 1865. So he did that before Congress or Thaddeus Stevens had anything to say about it. So anyway, back to, just wanted to, movies screw up historical facts all the time.
Not just David. Jeff Davis, too. Lee. Oh, yes, Lee as well. You're right, you have the power. Congress can't stop. The rebel snake in the South crawl out of the hidden den into the daylight. Johnson?
Just a little personal aside, when I had a coffee house, I had a Thaddeus Stevens sandwich, but I have little Thaddeus Stevens pictures on toothpicks that I'd stick in there. And every time I served to somebody, I'd have a little recording that said, "Now every rebel snake will crawl out of its den."
Good, nice. And what you plan to do in the news, the rule. You honestly believe that, don't you? You know I do. I haven't long to live. Just kept alive for the day of retribution and justice, so I could die happy knowing my decree, country, peace. You call revenge, confiscation, and disfranchisement peace. You no pity for those 4 million injured, depressed, hopeless colored people under bondage for 2 centuries. I want the 2 races to live together peacefully, to respect one another. Your way of making slaves of the whites would put that off another century. You withdraw this for the sake of peace, I'll quash
This never happened.
Yeah. Well, Stephen, I decline your offer. I want to tell you one thing. I never really answered you. I always thought you wanted to puppet president. I called you a hypocrite. You're not a very sincere man. And that's what makes you so dangerous. You have the sincerity and will and force. You have the drive of a great fanatic. So not robbery and all that before. Do not ruin the country with another war. I live long enough to stop that. My policy will go through you out of the way. Even if I'm not here to see it. Stephen. The matter? Just let me get you some coffee. Yeah. I'll crush you, Johnson. I'll save our country yet.
Now we're going to return to reality. This is the last group of clips I have, which is from a 2004 mini series that was on PBS about Reconstruction. And in this one, it gives a much more realistic review of Thaddeus Stevens and his policies and Andrew Johnson. So we'll go to that.
So Ross, in the movie, he dies right there at that?
No, he doesn't actually. He just collapses and then continues his effort to impeach him, and they actually have the impeachment proceeding. And there's also Johnson goes before the Senate and makes a plea, which he never did. In reality, he let his lawyers talk for him. And the movie ends with Johnson coming back to, he was re-elected, he was elected to the Senate later, right before he died, and it has Johnson coming back to the Senate.
Does Lydia appear in this movie at all?
Well, you might say she does. There's one point in the movie where Thaddeus Stevens is gotten out of bed to confront Johnson, and there is a black woman who says, "Don't you get out of bed, you're gonna catch your death. You know, you're gonna die." And he responds, "I'll die when I want to die." So that's about the only thing that you have in Lydia. She's not identified as Lydia or an evil schemer or anything like that.
But she's a black mammy sort of.
Yeah, actually, exactly. That's the way I would put it. You know, like from Gone with the Wind.
Yeah.
You know.
Roughly the same period.
Yeah.
Film period, I mean.
Johnson's aim is to bring the white South and the white North back together. African Americans just do not play a role in Johnson's vision of the post-war South other than to go back to work and be landless and rightless plantation laborers.
Johnson's contempt for the freedmen infuriated many in Washington, and none more than Thaddeus Stevens. The congressman from Pennsylvania had been a fierce abolitionist long before the war. Within the Republican Party, he led a small vocal faction known as the Radicals.
These were principled men. Before the war, they had been the strongest Republicans opposing the expansion of slavery. During the Civil War, they had been the first ones to call for arming of black troops, for issuing an emancipation proclamation. Long before there was any conceivable political benefit to be gained from supporting the rights of black people, they were doing it.
The radical Republicans had a vision of what Reconstruction should be. They believed it should be longer in duration. They believed the Southern states had left the Union and had destroyed their status as states. They had to be reinvented. To Thaddeus Stevens, Reconstruction meant not only safeguarding and preserving the essential results of the Civil War, But in his vision, it meant remaking the South. It meant the increase of democracy in terms of representation. It meant the spread of the right of suffrage.
The radicals' hard line marginalized them within their own party. Most Republicans feared the radicals' position on black rights would drive away white voters in the North.
It is the radical wing which is the most sympathetic to black people. The party in general was committed to a limited program of civil rights, protection of property, education, etc. But the party is not in any way committed to any sort of radical restructuring of Southern society.
Johnson's Reconstruction plan could not be challenged until Congress convened in December. That summer, radical leaders could only watch as scores of planters descended on Washington, pleading to be pardoned. Whose petition would be denied or granted was uncertain. Still, former Confederates were hopeful. White men alone, President Johnson told one senator, must manage the South. In December 1865, the 39th Congress, the first since the end of the Civil War, convened in Washington. More than 60 former Confederates prepared to take their seats, including 4 generals, 4 colonels, and 6 Confederate cabinet officers. Even Alexander H. Stevens, the former vice president of the Confederacy, expecting, as one observer put it, to govern the country he had been trying to destroy.
If the South is going to rise again, so to speak, control its own political life, control the freed people, indeed if ex-Confederates themselves are going to be allowed back into leadership at the national level, then to so many white Northerners it seemed like the war would have been fought in vain.
On the opening day, the clerk of the House refused to announce the names of the Southern delegates in his roll call. The former Confederates were denied their elected seats and sent packing.
Now this is one part I wish they'd go into a little bit more detail, because this is what I call how Thaddeus Stevens and Edward McPherson saved the country. As they said, they had been elected to Congress. It would have been absolutely a disaster if they had taken over. Slavery would have continued in the South because the South had reinstated slavery through the black codes, which essentially made blacks convicts, which evaded the 13th Amendment. And they wanted the U.S. government to pay for the Confederate debts, so they could have embraced the Confederate debt and rejected the federal debt if they had taken over Congress. So anyway, Thaddeus Stevens came up with a plan with Edward McPherson, who was the clerk of the House, and also Stevens' protege from Gettysburg. He got his job through Thaddeus Stevens. And so Edward McPherson calls out the roll, he gets to the Southern names and skips them. The Southerners jump up and down and say, you can't do that, you can't do that. Thaddeus Stevens gets up and says, point of order, we can discuss no business until we call the roll. They call the roll, the Southerners are out, and that's the beginning of Reconstruction. So remember that date, December 4th, should be a national holiday. Also, this seems to be slow speaking, I don't know.
The fight for control of Reconstruction had begun.
In many ways, Congress was a poisoned atmosphere in the debates over the Reconstruction policy. There were raw war memories being played out. There were visceral hatreds being played out on the floor of Congress between Republicans and Democrats. These debates are between men who have experienced this war, who have fought this war. They are fighting literally about the meaning of that conflict they have just fought.
Northern Democrats sided with Johnson and railed against Republicans across the aisle. Washington must get out of the way, they insisted, and let Southerners run their own affairs.
The Democrats had always identified themselves as the party of the white man. They very explicitly said, we are here to protect the rights of white men, North and South. And how do we do that? We hold the Union together. For that reason, the Democrats saw themselves as trying to put North and South together as quickly as possible during the Civil War, and as soon as it's over, trying to knit North and South together at the expense of black men.
At one point in the debate, Thaddeus Stevens stood up and, answering his Democratic colleagues, says, "Do not, I pray you, admit those who have slaughtered 500,000 of our countrymen until their clothes are dried and until they are reclaimed. I do not wish to sit side by side with men whose garments smell of the blood of my kindred." It was Stevens' way of saying, we're going to keep the South out of the Union as long as we can, and we're not going to allow anybody back in here who was responsible for making the war.
A congressional committee on Reconstruction concluded that Southern governments were unable to keep law and order or stem violence against African Americans. Allowing Southern states unchecked power so soon after the war, the committee said, was madness and lunacy. Moderate Republicans had hoped to persuade Johnson to provide minimal protections for blacks in the South. Now, even they were growing impatient with the president's policies. President, egotistic to the point of mental disease, insincere as well as stubborn, cunning as well as unreasonable, vain as well as ill-tempered. won 3/4 of the seats in both houses of Congress, enough to override any Johnson veto. In only 18 months, the radicals had gone from a fringe minority to the center of Republican leadership. Now it was their turn to define the course of Reconstruction. Thaddeus Stevens was 75 years old, so frail that he had to be carried into the House of Representatives by admirers. In a voice his colleagues could barely hear, the tireless Stevens made a final plea for federal intervention in the southern states.
Congress has been sitting here, and while the South has been bleeding at every pore, Congress has done nothing to protect the loyal people there, white or black, either in their persons, in their liberty, or in their property.
In March 1867, both houses of Congress again rejected a veto by President Johnson and passed the Radicals' Reconstruction Plan. The former Confederate states were divided into 5 military districts, each commanded by a general with power to enforce law and administer justice. New Southern governments would be created. They would have to ratify the 14th Amendment. Their new state constitutions would have to be approved by Congress. And black men would have the right to vote.
This really was a remarkable leap in the dark for world history. It's the first large-scale experiment in interracial democracy that had existed anywhere.
Okay. That's the end. You can see who the hero in that one is and the villain in that. That is not going to be the last portrayal of Thaddeus Stevens. At the end of this year, there's a new movie coming out by Steven Spielberg called Lincoln, in which Tommy Lee Jones will be portraying Thaddeus Stevens. And I have been anxious about finding out how they're going to portray him this time. I have high hopes that it will be favorable, considering Steven Spielberg's various social movies that he's done, like Armistead, Schindler's List. And Tony Kirshner, the main writer, wrote Angels in America, which is a famous Broadway play about AIDS. And I've also happened to get a contact on the production team of Lincoln, who said that, in a short email, she said that Thaddeus Stevens' character was one of her favorite characters, and that he portrayed Thaddeus Stevens with his humor and his bitter opposition to slavery. So we'll find out at the end of the year how that comes out, and we'll hopefully be celebrating. So that's the end of my presentation. I see that I'm really kind of coming up against the end of my period. Can we get a couple questions? Diane, do you think we can?
Well, the thing is a couple people have wanted to go see the archives, so Tim's going to take them up. But if anybody else has questions, they can feel free to ask them. Because he has to go do the setup at the cemetery for the microphone over there. So.
Okay, fine. Anybody have any questions?
Very good.
Are they still selling your Thaddeus Stevens sandwiches?
No, they're not. The people who bought my place got rid of the Thaddeus Stevens sandwiches.
Thank you for your research. starts at 5.
Oh,